Welcome back to Close Up. The race for Secretary of State is in full swing now, with 42-year incumbent Bill Gardner facing a serious challenge from within his own party. Frustration with Gardner among Democrats isn't necessarily new, but it began to reach a critical stage in 2017. If longtime New Hampshire Secretary of State Bill Gardner loses his bid for a 22nd term, the seed of his political demise may have been sown in a tweet. In November 2016, not long after winning the White House, President Donald Trump named New Hampshire in a tweet alleging, quote, serious voter fraud and a media cover-up. Gardner, like many other state officials, was taken aback.
I'm not going to speculate what he might mean by what he said.
Gardner's deputy, David Scanlon, was somewhat more forceful in rejecting a claim many viewed as baseless and inflammatory.
There's no indication of anything that widespread taking place in New Hampshire. If he has evidence to the contrary, he should pass it along so that we can act on it.
No such evidence was ever presented, and even top Republican leaders like Governor Chris Sununu spoke out in defense of New Hampshire's elections. But he didn't reject the idea of continuing the voter fraud debate.
I do not believe that we have widespread voter fraud here in New Hampshire. However, there have been some assertions by the president and his administration to the contrary, and we'll continue to discuss those issues with the administration.
That discussion would eventually take the form of a new presidential commission on election integrity. And in May 2017, the White House announced it had secured a trusted Democratic voice to serve on that commission, Bill Gardner. But Gardner's decision to accept an appointment from Trump riled his fellow Democrats, who were blunt in their assessment of the secretary's value to the president and the commission.
I think he's being used.
The debate quickly intensified as the commission requested voter data from all 50 states, and Secretary Gardner said he'd comply by sharing New Hampshire's publicly available voter rolls. He saw the decision as uncontroversial.
Because it's public information.
But it further inflamed the opposition and prompted one state rep to take him to court.
Bill Gardner has been an exceptional Secretary of State. He wants to do the right thing. He wants to root out voter fraud. So do I. But we have to do it with respect to the privacy of New Hampshire voters.
Around that same time, a new arrival reshaped the debate and emboldened Democrats. Former Missouri Secretary of State Jason Kander began making regular trips to New Hampshire. In a prelude to what many thought might be an eventual presidential campaign, Kander took aim at the president's Electoral Integrity Commission. He was careful to avoid criticizing Secretary Gardner directly, but the message he delivered on Gardner's home turf was exactly what opponents of Trump had been waiting to hear.
I'll let Bill speak for himself, but the commission as a whole has a pretty clear purpose, and the purpose of the commission is to take this giant lie, really the biggest lie that a sitting president has ever told, that 3 to 5 million illegal voters voted in the election, which, by the way, just happens to be the margin by which the president lost the popular vote. I think that has a little to do with why he came up with that lie. But the idea behind the commission is just to formalize that lie.
When the commission held its first meeting in Washington that summer, Gardner said his participation was about seeking answers and improving voter confidence in elections.
The polls have shown, I saw the Gallup poll the week before the presidential election, 55% have said there's voter fraud. Why are so many people in the country actually saying that?
When President Trump spoke, he questioned why some states wouldn't turn over voter data.
If any state does not want to share this information, one has to wonder what they're worried about. And I asked the vice president, I asked the commission, what are they worried about? There's something. There always is.
In September, the commission came to first in the nation, New Hampshire. The chairman, Chris Kobach, further fanned the flames of controversy by penning an op-ed ahead of the meeting, alleging that voter fraud had changed the outcome of the 2016 Senate election that Republican Kelly Ayotte lost to Democrat Maggie Hassan.
There have often been anecdotal reports of people driving into New Hampshire because it's a same-day registration state and voting because it's a battleground state.
Kobach's charges, presented without conclusive evidence or subsequent follow-up, prompted the sharpest rebuke Gardner would deliver in this process.
The problem that has occurred because of what you wrote is that the question of whether our election as we have recorded it, is real and valid. And it is real and valid. And
The election's over and done with, but clearly there are reasons for concern, and that's why the New Hampshire legislature has addressed it time and time again.
The debate did return to the legislature again in 2018, but not before the president dissolved his commission. New Hampshire had not yet transmitted its voter data to Washington, and aside from a heated debate and some cleanup of non-public information in the town checklists, the only discernible political impact of the commission locally had been to create a deep rift between Gardner and his fellow Democrats. But on that snowy January day the commission dissolved, Gardner told us he had no regrets.
This is a free society. It's very diverse. There's a lot of different opinions among folks in this country. And we don't get anywhere if we just refuse to even be willing to listen.